The dust cloud appeared on the horizon first, small and desperate, and by the time Travis Fontaine could make out the figure stumbling beneath its weight, the sun had already burned halfway across the Montana sky. He had been riding fence lines for 3 days straight, checking posts and mending wire on the sprawling ranch that sprawled across the valley like a promise half kept. The year was 1882, and Montana territory was still raw enough that a man could lose himself in the work and find himself in the silence. Travis pulled his sorrel mare to a stop at the edge of the property where it met the rutted road leading into town, squinting against the glare. The figure resolved itself into a woman, bent nearly double under the burden of what looked like everything she owned, strapped to her back and clutched in both arms. He watched her stumble, catch herself, keep walking. The nearest town was Billings, still 5 miles down that road, and the afternoon heat was the kind that could kill a person who did not know better. Travis touched his heels to the mare's flanks and rode down to meet her. She heard him coming and stopped, swaying slightly as she turned. Her face was burned red across the cheekbones and nose, her lips cracked and bleeding at the corners. Dark hair had escaped from what might have once been a neat bun and now hung in sweaty tangles around her face. She wore a traveling dress that had seen better days, the hem thick with dust and one sleeve torn at the shoulder. In her arms, she carried a carpet bag that bulged at the seams, and strapped to her back was a bundle wrapped in a quilt tied with rope. Travis pulled up a few feet away and touched the brim of his hat. The woman's eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and wary and exhausted all at once. "Need some help?" he asked. She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing her options, calculating risks. Finally she said, "I can manage." Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. Travis glanced at the road behind her, then at the empty miles stretching ahead. "How long you been walking?" "Since dawn." "You got water?" She hesitated, then shook her head. Travis pulled his canteen from his saddle and held it out. "Drink slow. Heat like this, you gulp it down too fast and you will just bring it back up." She shifted the carpet bag to one hip and reached for the canteen with a hand that trembled. He watched her force herself to take small sips when he could see she wanted to drain the whole thing. When she handed it back, some of the wariness had left her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "Where are you headed?" "Billings." "That is still a good 5 miles. You will not make it in this heat carrying all that." "I said I can manage." Travis studied her for another moment. She had the kind of stubborn pride that came from having to take care of yourself for too long. He recognized it because he had spent the better part of his 26 years cultivating the same quality. "Tell you what," he said, "my ranch is just over that rise. You can rest there, get some proper water and food, and I will take you into town when it cools down this evening. No sense in walking yourself into heat stroke just to prove a point." "I am not proving a point." "Then you are being practical. And practically speaking, you need help whether you want to admit it or not." She looked at him again with those storm cloud eyes, and he could see her turning it over in her mind. He sat easy in the saddle, keeping his hands visible and his expression neutral. Finally she said, "You got a wife at this ranch of yours?" "No, madam. Just me and my foreman, Dutch Harper. He's about 60 years old and deaf in one ear. We got a cook who comes up from town 3 times a week, but today is not one of those days." "So you're asking me to come to a ranch with 2 strange men and no other women around?" Travis nodded slowly. "I am, but I'm also asking you to not die of heat stroke because you are too proud or too scared to accept help. Your choice entirely." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What is your name?" "Travis Fontaine. This is Fontaine Ranch. Been in my family for 15 years. "I am Zara Gallagher." "Pleased to meet you, Miss Gallagher. Now can I give you a hand with those bags?" Zara looked down at her burden, then back up at him. "If I get on that horse with you and you try anything, I have a knife in my boot and I know how to use it." "Duly noted," Travis said. He swung down from the saddle and reached for her bags. She let him take them, though he could see it cost her something to do it. The carpet bag was heavier than it looked, stuffed with what felt like books and heavy fabric. The bundle on her back turned out to be clothes and linens wrapped around a small wooden box. He tied everything securely to the saddle, then held out his hand to help her mount. She ignored it and pulled herself up despite the fact that her legs were shaking with exhaustion. Travis swung up behind her, keeping a respectful distance. and turned the mare toward home. They rode in silence. Zara sat stiff in the saddle, holding herself carefully away from him. Travis kept the mare to a walk, partly because of the extra weight, and partly because he could feel how close to collapse this woman was. Up close, he could see that beneath the sunburn and exhaustion, she was probably close to his own age, maybe a year or two younger. She had fine bones and capable hands, and the kind of face that would be striking once she got some rest and food in her. The ranch house appeared over the rise, a sturdy log structure with a wide porch and a stone chimney. Behind it spread the barn, the bunkhouse, the corrals, and the various outbuildings that kept a working ranch functioning. Dutch was in the yard, working on a broken wagon wheel, and he looked up as they approached, his weathered face creasing into a frown. Travis pulled up at the porch and dismounted, then helped Zara down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit the ground, and she had to grab the porch railing to steady herself. "Dutch, this is Miss Zara Gallagher. She was walking to Billings in the afternoon heat. I told her she could rest here and get some food before I take her into town this evening." Dutch stood up, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Pleased to meet you, miss. Travis, you better get her inside and into some shade. She looks about ready to keel over." Travis guided Zara up the porch steps and into the house. The interior was dim and cool, the thick log walls keeping out the worst of the heat. He led her to the kitchen table and pulled out a chair. "Sit," he said. "I will get you some water and something to eat." Zara sank into the chair like her strings had been cut. Travis worked quickly, pumping fresh water from the kitchen pump and filling a pitcher, then slicing bread and cheese and setting out some cold chicken left over from yesterday's dinner. He put it all in front of her and stepped back. "Eat," he said. "Take your time." She ate like someone who had not seen food in a while, trying to pace herself but unable to hide her hunger. Travis refilled her water glass twice and then sat down across from her, giving her space but staying close enough to catch her if she fainted. When she finally pushed her plate away, some color had returned to her face. She met his eyes across the table and said, "Thank you." "You're welcome. When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning." Travis nodded. "Where are you coming from?" Zara was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the scarred wood of the table. "Helena. I was working in a boarding house there, but the owner sold the property and the new owner wanted to bring in his own staff. I heard there were jobs in Billings, so I figured I would try my luck." "You walked from Helena?" "I took the stage as far as I could afford, but my money ran out about 15 miles back. So yes, I walked the rest." Travis sat back in his chair. Helena was over 100 miles from here. Whatever money she had scraped together had not been much. "You got family in Billings?" No family anywhere anymore." There was a weight to those words that Travis recognized. He had lost his own parents 5 years back, his father to a horse accident, and his mother to pneumonia the following winter. He and Dutch had kept the ranch running through sheer stubbornness and hard work. "Well," he said, "you are welcome to rest here as long as you need. There is a spare room upstairs with a decent bed. You look like you could use some real sleep." Zara shook her head. "I need to get to Billings and find work. I cannot afford to waste time resting." "You cannot afford to arrive in town looking like you just crawled through the desert either. No one is going to hire someone who looks half dead. Get some sleep, clean yourself up, and I will take you into town tomorrow morning when you are in better shape to make a good impression." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. He could see her weighing practicality against pride again, and this time practicality won. "Tomorrow morning," she said, "and I will work for my room and board. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, whatever you need." "You do not have to do that." "Yes, I do. I am not a charity case, Mr. Fontaine." Travis nodded. "Fair enough. The spare room is at the top of the stairs, second door on the left. There's a wash basin and some clean towels in there. I will bring up your bags." He showed her upstairs carrying her belongings to the small but clean room that had once belonged to his mother. Zara stood in the doorway, looking around at the simple furniture and the window that overlooked the valley. "Thank you," she said again, and this time there was less wariness in her voice. Travis touched his hat brim and left her to it. He went back downstairs and out to the yard where Dutch was still working on the wagon wheel. "She all right?" Dutch asked without looking up. "She will be. She walked most of the way from Helena looking for work." Dutch whistled low. "That's a hell of a walk. What's her story?" Boarding house in Helena closed. She's got no family, looking for a fresh start in Billings. Billings, Dutch said, testing the word. Not much there for a woman on her own. Travis knew that. Billings was growing, but it was still rough, still mostly men working mines and ranches and railroad. A woman alone would have a hard time of it, especially one with no connections and no money. Not our problem, Travis said, as much to himself as to Dutch. Dutch gave him a look but said nothing. Travis spent the rest of the afternoon working, but his mind kept drifting back to the woman sleeping upstairs. There was something about her that had gotten under his skin, some combination of vulnerability and strength that made him want to help her, even though he knew better than to get involved. He had learned early that the world did not reward softness, that you had to look out for yourself first. But he also remembered what it felt like to be desperate and alone. The sun was setting when Zara appeared on the porch. She had washed her face and hands and fixed her hair, and though she still looked tired, there was a new determination in her bearing. Travis was sitting on the porch steps, watching the light fade across the valley, and he stood as she approached. "Feel better?" he asked. "Much, thank you." "You're welcome to stay for supper if you want. Dutch is making stew." Zara hesitated, then nodded. "I would like that." They ate at the kitchen table, the three of them, and Dutch told stories about the early days of the ranch that made Zara laugh despite her exhaustion. Travis watched her across the table, noticing the way her whole face changed when she smiled, the wariness dropping away to reveal someone younger and lighter than the woman he had found on the road. After dinner, she insisted on washing the dishes, and Travis dried them while Dutch went out to check on the horses. They worked in comfortable silence, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised them both. "How long have you been ranching?" Zara asked after a while. "All my life, really. My father homesteaded this land back in 1867, right after the war. I was just a boy then, but I remember helping him build the first cabin. We have added on and improved it over the years." "And your mother?" "Died 5 years ago. Pneumonia. My father died the year before in a riding accident." "I'm sorry," Travis shrugged. "It is the way of things out here. Land gives and takes in equal measure." Zara was quiet for a moment, drying her hands on a towel. "My mother died when I was 12. My father remarried, and his new wife made it clear there was not room for me anymore. I have been on my own since I was 15. Travis felt something tighten in his chest. 15 was too young to be on your own, too young to have to navigate the world without anyone watching your back. That must have been hard. It was necessary. I've done all right for myself. I'm a hard worker, good with numbers, good with people. I just need a chance to prove it." There was a fierceness in her voice that Travis respected. She was not asking for pity or sympathy, just acknowledgement of her own competence. He understood that kind of pride. "I am sure you will do fine in Billings," he said, though the words felt hollow, even as he spoke them. That night, Travis lay in his bed listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling around him. He could hear Dutch snoring down the hall, the distant lowing of cattle, the wind moving through the grass. And somewhere above him, Zara Gallagher was sleeping in his mother's old room, and Travis could not stop thinking about what would happen to her when he took her to Billings in the morning. He told himself it was none of his business. She was a grown woman, capable of making her own decisions. He had done his good deed by giving her shelter and food. He did not owe her anything more. But sleep was a long time coming. The next morning dawned clear and cool, the kind of perfect Montana morning that made you forget how brutal the heat would be by afternoon. Travis was up early feeding the horses when Zara came out of the house carrying her bags. She had on the same traveling dress but had somehow managed to make it look presentable, and her hair was pinned up neatly beneath a simple bonnet. "I am ready whenever you are," she said. Travis finished with the horses and saddled the wagon. It would be more comfortable for the trip into town, and he needed to pick up some supplies anyway. Zara climbed up onto the bench seat without waiting for help, and they set off down the rutted road toward Billings. They rode in silence for the first few miles. The valley spread out around them, golden in the morning light, and Travis found himself wishing the ride was longer, which was foolish. He barely knew this woman. She was just passing through his life, a brief interruption in the steady rhythm of ranch work and solitude. "Can I ask you something?" Zara said suddenly. "Sure." "Why did you help me yesterday? You did not know me. I could have been anyone." Travis considered the question. I guess because someone helped me once when I needed it. Seemed like the right thing to pass it along. What happened? After my father died, the bank tried to foreclose on the ranch. We had some bad years with drought and lost cattle, and we fell behind on payments. I was going to lose everything my parents had built. Dutch went into town and talked to some people he knew, called in some favors, and somehow convinced the bank to give us more time. We worked day and night for 2 years straight to catch up, but we made it. If Dutch had not helped, I would have lost this place. Zara nodded slowly. It must be nice to have someone who has your back like that. It is. Dutch is family, even if we are not blood. I have never had that, Zara said quietly. Someone I could count on no matter what. Travis glanced at her. She was looking out at the valley, her profile clean and strong against the bright sky. Maybe you will find it in Billings. Maybe? But she did not sound convinced, and neither was Travis. They reached Billings just before noon. It was a bustling town, growing fast with the influx of miners and railroad workers. The main street was crowded with freight wagons and horses, and the wooden sidewalks were busy with people going about their business. Travis pulled the wagon up outside the general store and set the brake. Where do you want to start? He asked. Zara looked around, and he could see her marshaling her courage. The hotels, I suppose, or boarding houses, anywhere that might need staff. Travis climbed down and came around to help her with her bags. I need to get supplies. Will take me about an hour. If you want, you can leave your things in the wagon and come back here when you are done looking around. I can wait for you. Zara looked at him for a long moment. You have already done enough, Mr. Fontaine. I can take it from here. I know you can, but the offer stands. She nodded. Thank you for everything. Travis watched her walk away down the street, her back straight and her head high despite the weight of her bags. Then he went into the general store and tried to focus on his supply list. An hour later, he had loaded the wagon, and Zara had not returned. He told himself it was a good sign, that she had probably found work already. But something made him walk down to the hotel district to look for her anyway. He found her sitting on a bench outside the Grand Hotel, her bags at her feet and her face carefully blank. Travis sat down next to her without saying anything. They all said no, Zara said after a while. Every hotel, every boarding house, every restaurant. They all said they did not need help, or they wanted someone with more experience, or they just looked at me and decided they did not like what they saw. One manager actually told me I looked too desperate, that it would make the guests uncomfortable. Travis felt anger kindle in his chest. They are fools. Maybe. Or maybe they are just being practical. Why hire a stranger with no references when you can hire someone local? So what are you going to do? Zara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I do not know. I have $3 left to my name. I can rent a room for a few nights, but after that, she trailed off, her jaw tight. Travis made a decision. Come back to the ranch. What? Come back to the ranch and work for me. I need help with the house anyway. Cooking, cleaning, mending. Dutch and I are not exactly skilled at domestic matters. I will pay you fair wages, room and board included, and you can save up money while you figure out your next move. Zara turned to look at him, her gray eyes searching his face. Why would you do that? Because you need help and I need a housekeeper. Seems like it works out for both of us. You do not even know me. I know you are a hard worker and you are honest. That is more than I can say for most people. Look, I am not asking you to commit to forever. Just come work for me for a while, save up some money, and when you are ready to move on, no hard feelings. But at least you will have options instead of ending up desperate in a town where no one will give you a chance. Zara looked away, and Travis could see her wrestling with pride and practicality again. Finally, she said, I will not be a charity case. You will not be. I will work you hard enough to earn every penny I pay you. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Is that a promise? Absolutely. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. All right, I will take the job, but just temporarily until I get on my feet. Fair enough? They shook hands on it there on the bench outside the Grand Hotel, sealing a bargain that would change both their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. The first few weeks fell into a rhythm that surprised both of them with its ease. Zara threw herself into her work with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else. She took over the kitchen completely, and suddenly Travis and Dutch were eating proper meals 3 times a day instead of the rough bachelor fare they had been making do with. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, mended all their worn clothes, organized the pantry and the supply room, and generally brought a sense of order to the household that had been missing since Travis's mother died. But she also did not limit herself to the house. On her second week, she asked Travis to teach her about ranching, and he found himself explaining fence repair and cattle rotation and water management to an eager pupil who asked smart questions and remembered everything he told her. She started helping with the smaller chores, collecting eggs from the chickens, feeding the pigs, grooming the horses. She was not afraid of hard work or getting dirty, and Travis respected that. What surprised him more was how much he enjoyed her company. In the evenings after supper, they would sit on the porch and talk, watching the sun set over the valley. Zara told him about her childhood in Missouri before her mother died, about learning to read from a school teacher who took pity on her, about the various jobs she had worked over the years. Travis found himself telling her things he had never told anyone, about his fear of losing the ranch after his parents died, about the loneliness of being the last Fontaine, about his dreams of building something that would last beyond his lifetime. Dutch watched them with knowing eyes, but said nothing, just smiled into his coffee when he thought they were not looking. One evening in late September, a month after Zara had arrived, Travis was teaching her how to rope fence posts. She was terrible at it, the loop constantly going wide or falling short, but she kept trying with a determination that made him laugh. "You are thinking too hard," he said. "It is about feel, not calculation." "Easy for you to say. You have been doing this since you were a child. Here." He stepped up behind her and put his hands over hers on the rope. "Feel the weight of it. Let your body do the work, not your mind." He was acutely aware of how close they were standing, the warmth of her back against his chest, the clean scent of soap and sunshine in her hair. He felt her tense for a moment, then relax as she focused on the rope in their joined hands. He guided her through the motion, slow and easy, and the loop sailed out to settle neatly around the post. "I did it!" Zara turned to look up at him, her face alight with triumph, and suddenly Travis realized that somewhere in the past month he had stopped thinking of her as a temporary employee and started thinking of her as something else entirely. He stepped back quickly, clearing his throat. "Practice that a few more times. I need to go check on the north pasture." He walked away before she could see the confusion on his face, before she could ask questions he did not know how to answer. That night Travis lay awake again, but this time it was not worry keeping him from sleep. It was the memory of Zara's smile, the feel of her hands beneath his, the way his heart had kicked up when she turned to look at him. He was in trouble, and he knew it. He had not been with a woman since before his mother died, too busy keeping the ranch afloat to think about courting or marriage. There had been a girl once, back when he was 20, but she had wanted a life in town with parties and social calls, and Travis could not be anything other than what he was. So she had married a banker, and Travis had thrown himself into the ranch and told himself it was enough. But now Zara was here, sleeping down the hall in his mother's old room, and everything felt different. The house felt more like a home with her in it. The meals tasted better. The evenings were warmer. He looked forward to each day in a way he had not in years, and the thought of her leaving someday made his chest tight, which was foolish because she had made it clear from the start that this was temporary. She was saving her money and building her references so she could move on to something better. She had not signed on to be a rancher's wife in the middle of Montana territory. She had dreams of her own. Travis needed to remember that. But remembering got harder every day. October brought cold mornings and the first threat of snow. The cattle had to be moved down from the high pastures, and Travis spent long days in the saddle making sure none of the herd got left behind. Zara started meeting him on the porch when he came home in the evenings, a cup of hot coffee ready and concern in her eyes when he was later than usual. "You push yourself too hard," she said one evening as he sank gratefully into a porch chair. "Cattle will not move themselves. Dutch could do more, or you could hire some temporary hands. Dutch is getting too old for the hard work, though he would never admit it, and temporary hands cost money we do not have to spare." Zara sat down in the chair next to him, wrapping her shawl tighter against the evening chill. "Tell me about the ranch. Why is it so important to you? Travis sipped his coffee, considering the question. My grandfather fought in the war, came home to nothing. He headed west, looking for a fresh start, but died on the trail. My father made it through, claimed this land, built this place from nothing. He used to say that a man is not measured by what he inherits, but by what he builds and what he leaves behind. This ranch is my father's legacy. I will not let it fail. But what do you want? Zara asked softly. Not what your father wanted. Not what you think you should want. What does Travis Fontaine want for his life? No one had ever asked him that before. Travis stared out at the darkening valley, watching the first stars appear. I want this land to matter. I want to build something that lasts. He paused, then said carefully, I want to not be alone anymore. He felt Zara go still beside him. When he finally dared to look at her, she was watching him with an expression he could not quite read. You do not have to be, she said. You are leaving eventually. You said so yourself. I said it was temporary, but temporary can become permanent if both parties want it to. Travis's heart was hammering in his chest. What are you saying? Zara stood up and moved to the porch railing, her back to him. I am saying that I like it here. I like the work. I like the land. I like Dutch. And she took a breath. I like you, Travis Fontaine, more than I probably should. Travis set down his coffee and stood, crossing to stand behind her. He wanted to touch her, but did not quite dare. How much more? She turned to face him, and there was vulnerability in her eyes that he had never seen before. Enough that the thought of leaving makes me want to cry. Enough that I have started thinking of this place as home. Enough that when you look at me the way you are looking at me right now, I can barely breathe. Travis reached up slowly and touched her cheek, giving her plenty of time to pull away. She did not. Instead, she leaned into his hand, her eyes never leaving his. I have been falling for you since the day I found you on that road, he said roughly. Maybe before that, from the moment I saw you refuse to give up even though you were half dead from heat and exhaustion. You are the strongest, bravest person I have ever met, and I do not want you to leave. I want you to stay here with me, not as an employee, as my partner, as my wife, if you will have me. Zara's eyes went wide. You are proposing. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few months, but out here, time moves different. You learn what matters quick, and Zara Gallagher, you matter. You matter more than anything. She was crying now, tears slipping down her cheeks even as she smiled. Yes. Yes? Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I will stay. Yes to all of it. Travis pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and it felt like coming home. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck, her body pressed against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she laughed against his chest. Dutch is going to say he knew all along, she said. Dutch is a know-it-all. He is right, though. Travis pulled back enough to look at her face, wanting to memorize this moment. I do not have much to offer you. Just this ranch and a hard life and a man who is going to love you until the day he dies. That sounds like everything to me, Zara said. They were married 2 weeks later in Billings, with Dutch and the general store owner and his wife as witnesses. It was a simple ceremony, but when Travis slipped his mother's wedding band onto Zara's finger, he felt the weight of promise and possibility settle around them both. Zara wore a new dress she had sewn herself from fabric Travis had bought as a wedding gift, a deep blue that made her eyes look like summer storms. They returned to the ranch that evening as husband and wife, and Travis carried her over the threshold while Dutch whooped and hollered from the yard. That night, Travis moved his things into his mother's old room where Zara had been sleeping, and they lay together in the bed listening to the wind outside and marveling at how much their lives had changed. Are you scared? Zara asked in the darkness. Terrified, Travis admitted. What if I am not a good enough husband? What if the ranch fails and I cannot provide for you the way you deserve? Zara rolled over to face him, her hand finding his in the dark. We will figure it out together. That is what marriage means, right? Facing everything that comes as a team. When did you get so wise? About the same time I got desperate enough to walk 15 miles in the heat carrying everything I owned. Travis laughed and pulled her close. Best thing that ever happened to me, you showing up like that. Best thing that ever happened to me was you offering help to a stranger who probably looked half crazy." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and Travis slept better than he had in years. The first winter was hard. Snow came early and stayed late, and the work of keeping the ranch running in the cold was brutal. But Zara threw herself into it with the same determination she brought to everything, learning to break ice in the water troughs and feed cattle in blizzards and keep the house warm against the killing cold. She and Travis worked side by side from dawn to dusk, and in the evenings they collapsed exhausted into bed, so tired they could barely move, but happy in a way that made the exhaustion worthwhile. In February, Zara told him she was pregnant. Travis had been splitting wood when she came out to the woodpile, bundled against the cold. He took one look at her face and knew immediately that something was different. "I saw the doctor in town yesterday," she said, "when I went for supplies." Travis set down the axe. "And?" "And we're going to have a baby. Sometime in August, he thinks." Travis just stared at her for a moment, the news not quite sinking in. Then it hit him all at once, and he let out a whoop that probably scared the cattle, sweeping Zara up and spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "Travis, put me down. You will hurt yourself." He set her down gently, his hands on her still flat stomach. "A baby. We are having a baby." "We are." Zara's smile was radiant despite the cold. "Are you happy?" "Happy?" "Zara, I am." He could not find the words, so he kissed her instead, pouring everything he felt into it. Dutch was beside himself with excitement when they told him, immediately beginning plans to convert part of the barn into a proper workshop so he could build a cradle. Spring came, and with it, the backbreaking work of calving season, but Travis found himself looking at the ranch with new eyes. He was not just maintaining his father's legacy anymore. He was building something for his own child, creating a future that stretched beyond himself. Zara bloomed as the pregnancy progressed. Even as her belly grew and the work became harder, she remained stubbornly independent, refusing to slow down until Travis and Dutch practically forced her to rest. She spent her last month sewing tiny clothes and knitting blankets, preparing the house for the arrival of their child with the same fierce organization she brought to everything. On a hot August night, with the doctor summoned from town and Dutch nervously pacing the porch, Zara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Travis was with her through all of it, holding her hand and wiping her face, and feeling utterly helpless as she labored to bring their son into the world. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Travis felt something in his chest crack wide open. The doctor placed the tiny bundle in his arms, and he stared down at his son, this impossibly small person who was half him and half Zara, and he understood suddenly what his father had meant about legacy and building something that mattered. "Hello there," he whispered. "Welcome to the world, little one." Zara reached for the baby and Travis carefully transferred him to her arms. She looked up at Travis with tears streaming down her face, exhausted and radiant and more beautiful than he had ever seen her. "What should we name him?" she asked. They had discussed names for months but never quite settled on anything. Now Travis looked at his son nursing at his wife's breast and said, "Matthew, after my father." Zara smiled. "Matthew Fontaine, I like it." Dutch came in an hour later and cried openly when he held the baby, this gruff old rancher reduced to mush by a 7-pound infant. "He is perfect," Dutch said. "Just perfect." "He is ours," Travis said, and the weight of that settled warm and real around his heart. The next few years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. Matthew grew from a baby into a toddler, learning to walk on sturdy legs and following Travis around the ranch like a devoted shadow. Zara proved to be a fierce and loving mother, managing to balance the demands of a growing child with the endless work of the ranch. She had found her place in the world, and it showed in the confidence of her bearing, the sureness of her steps. When Matthew was 3, Zara told Travis she was pregnant again. This time the news was less of a shock and more of a quiet joy, a deepening of the life they had built together. Their daughter was born in the spring, a tiny thing with Travis's dark hair and Zara's gray eyes. They named her Clara, after Zara's mother. Travis was 32 now, no longer the young man who had found a desperate stranger on the road. He had lines around his eyes from squinting at the sun, calluses on his hands from honest work, and a sense of peace he had never expected to find. The ranch was thriving, the herd growing, and he had expanded the property by purchasing the neighboring homestead when the owners decided to move back east. But more than the land or the cattle or the success of the ranch, he had Zara. She was his partner in every sense of the word, working beside him through heat and cold and all the hardships that Montana could throw at them. She kept the books, managed the household, raised their children, and somehow still found time to help with the cattle and the horses and everything else. They had built something together that was stronger than either of them could have built alone. One evening in late summer, when Matthew was 5 and Clara was 2, Travis and Zara sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Matthew was teaching Clara how to catch grasshoppers, both of them laughing as the insects jumped away. Dutch was in his rocking chair, dozing in the last rays of sunlight. "Do you ever regret it?" Travis asked suddenly. "Staying here? Marrying me? You could have had a different life." Zara turned to look at him, surprise clear on her face. "Where's this coming from?" "I just think about that day sometimes, finding you on the road. What if I had just ridden past? What if you had said no when I offered help? Your whole life would be different." "Yes," Zara said, "it would probably be worse. Travis, I was desperate and alone with nowhere to go. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me everything that matters. But you gave up your freedom, your chance to see the world, to be something other than a rancher's wife." Zara reached over and took his hand. "I gave up nothing. I chose this. I choose it every day. This ranch, these children, you. This is not settling for less, Travis. This is everything I ever wanted, but did not know how to ask for." Travis squeezed her hand, feeling the familiar calluses on her palm. "I love you. More now than the day I married you." "Good. Because you are stuck with me," she smiled. "Besides, who else would put up with your terrible roping instruction?" He laughed at that. "You still cannot rope worth a damn. I have other skills." "That you do." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children and the sunset, and feeling the deep contentment that comes from building a life that matters. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranching and family. Matthew grew tall and serious, already showing signs of the rancher he would become. Clara was all fire and determination, insisting on helping with everything despite being barely big enough to reach the stirrups. Travis taught them both to ride, to mend fences, to read the weather and the land. Zara taught them to read books, to do their numbers, to think critically and care deeply. When Dutch died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 75, the whole family mourned the loss of the man who had been grandfather to the children and friend to them all. They buried him on a hill overlooking the valley with a simple marker that read, "Dutch Harper, friend, partner, family." Matthew, now 10 years old, cried openly at the funeral, and Travis held his son and let him grieve, understanding that this was part of growing up, learning that loss was the price of love. They hired a new foreman, a young man named Sam, who reminded Travis of himself at that age, eager and hard-working and determined to prove himself. Sam was good with the cattle and the horses, respectful to Zara and patient with the children. He fit into the fabric of the ranch like he had always been there. When Matthew turned 16, he asked Travis if he could officially join the ranch work full-time instead of just helping after school. Travis looked at his son, nearly as tall as he was now, with his mother's stubborn determination and his own love for the land, and said yes. They shook hands on it like men, sealing the partnership that would eventually see Matthew inherit everything they had built. Clara, at 13, announced that she wanted to train horses, not just ride them, but break them and train them for sale. Travis was skeptical at first, but Zara told him to let their daughter try. So Clara threw herself into learning everything about horses, reading every book she could find, working with Sam and the ranch horses until she had a gift for it that was undeniable. By the time she was 16, people were bringing horses from 3 counties away for Clara Fontaine to train. Travis was 45 now, his hair showing threads of gray and his body bearing the accumulated aches of a lifetime of hard work. But he was happy in a way that still sometimes took him by surprise. The ranch was successful, his children were thriving, and Zara was still by his side, still his partner and his love and his best friend. One spring evening, Travis found Zara standing at the fence line looking out at the valley. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That day you found me. 23 years ago now. I was so scared, Travis. I thought my life was over, that I had run out of options and luck. And then you rode up and offered help to a stranger who probably looked like she was crazy." "You did look a little crazy," Travis admitted. She elbowed him gently. "I'm being serious." "So am I. But you also looked brave. That is what I remember most. How brave you were, walking into the unknown with your head high." Zara turned in his arms to face him. She was 48 now, with lines around her eyes and streaks of silver in her dark hair. But to Travis, she was as beautiful as the day he first saw her. More so, because now her beauty was layered with all the years they had lived together, all the moments of joy and sorrow and simple daily existence that had woven their lives together into something unbreakable. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing me, for offering help, for building this life with me, for loving me even when I was prickly and stubborn and probably drove you crazy." "You still drive me crazy," Travis said, "but I would not have it any other way." She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of 23 years of love and partnership. When they pulled apart, both smiling, Travis said, "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think we should take a trip, just the two of us. The children are old enough to manage the ranch with Sam for a few weeks. We could go see the ocean. You have never seen the ocean, have you?" Zara's eyes lit up. "Never. Are you serious?" "Completely. We have worked hard, Zara. We have earned a little adventure." So that summer, for the first time in their marriage, Travis and Zara left the ranch in the capable hands of their children and traveled west to Seattle. They took the train through mountains and across rivers, marveling at the changes that 23 years had brought to the territory. Montana was a state now, no longer wild and unsettled, but growing and modernizing. When they finally reached the coast and Travis led Zara down to the beach, she stood at the edge of the water and cried. The ocean stretched out impossibly vast before them, and Travis held her hand while she took it all in, this woman who had walked into his life carrying everything she owned and had given him everything that mattered. They spent 2 weeks exploring the coast, staying in a small hotel and walking on the beach and eating fresh seafood and just being together without the constant demands of the ranch. It was a gift this time, a reminder that they were not just partners in work but in life, that the love that had brought them together was still strong and true after all these years. When they returned to the ranch, tanned and relaxed and happy, Matthew and Clara greeted them with excited stories about everything that had happened while they were gone. The ranch had run smoothly, the cattle were fine, and Travis felt a deep pride in his children and what they had accomplished. That night, lying in bed with Zara, Travis said, "Thank you for saying yes." "To what? The trip?" "To everything. To staying. To marrying me. To building this life." Zara rolled over to face him in the darkness. "Travis Fontaine, I would say yes to you every day for the rest of my life." "Good," he said, "because I am not done with you yet." She laughed, the sound warm and familiar in the darkness. "You better not be. We still have a lot of living to do." And they did. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges and joys. Matthew married a schoolteacher from Billings and brought her to live on the ranch, building a house just over the rise from the main house. They had 3 children, giving Travis and Zara grandchildren to dote on and spoil. Clara eventually married the son of a neighboring rancher, a young man who respected her fierce independence and supported her horse training business. They built a house on the far side of the property and had 2 children of their own. The ranch grew and prospered, spreading across the valley like Travis's father had dreamed. But more than land or cattle or success, what Travis and Zara had built was family. A whole network of people connected by blood and love and shared purpose. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Matthew and his wife and children, Clara and her husband and children, Sam and his family, various neighbors and friends who had become part of the fabric of their lives. They roasted a steer and set up tables in the yard, and as the sun set over the valley, Travis stood up to make a toast. "But 40 years ago," he said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd, I found a woman carrying everything she owned, walking toward town in the brutal heat. I offered her help, not knowing that she was actually going to save me. Zara Gallagher Fontaine, you took a struggling ranch and a lonely man and turned them into a home and a family. Everything good in my life traces back to that day when I was smart enough to stop and offer help to a stranger. I love you more than words can say, and I thank God every day that you said yes. Zara stood up, her eyes shining with tears, and kissed him while their family cheered and applauded. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the yard had been cleaned up, Travis and Zara sat on the porch like they had done thousands of times before. They were both 70 now, their bodies bearing the marks of age and hard work, but their hands were still clasped together and their hearts still beat in the same rhythm. "Do you remember what you said that first day?" Zara asked. "When you found me on the road?" "I said, 'Need some help,'" Travis replied. 4 words that changed my entire life. "Changed mine too." Zara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm so grateful I said yes, not just to your help that day, but to everything that came after. The ranch, the marriage, the children, all of it. This life we built together is the best thing I could have ever hoped for." "It is not over yet," Travis said. "We still have more living to do." "I know, and I plan to do it all with you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out over the valley, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something that would last beyond their lifetimes. The ranch would go to Matthew and Clara and their children after them, but the real legacy was not the land or the cattle or the buildings. It was the love that had started with 4 simple words offered to a desperate stranger, a love that had grown and deepened and become the foundation for everything that mattered. As the night grew late and the temperature dropped, Travis helped Zara to her feet and they went inside together, still hand in hand after 40 years. The house wrapped around them, warm and familiar, full of memories and love. This was home. This was family. This was the life they had chosen and built and fought for together. And it was exactly enough. The years continued their steady march, and Travis and Zara grew old together on the ranch they had built. They watched their grandchildren grow up and start families of their own, adding yet another generation to the legacy they had started. Matthew took over most of the daily operations of the ranch, though Travis still insisted on helping when his body allowed it. Clara's horse training business had become regionally famous, and she had apprentices coming to learn from her from as far away as Wyoming and the Dakotas. Travis's health began to decline when he was 75, his heart growing weak from a lifetime of hard work. The doctor told him to slow down, to rest, but Travis was not built for idleness. He still rode out to check on the cattle when he could, still sat on the porch in the evenings watching the valley he loved. Zara was always by his side, her presence a constant comfort. One spring morning, Travis woke to the smell of coffee and fresh bread. He came downstairs to find Zara in the kitchen, her silver hair caught back in a bun, her capable hands kneading dough for the day's bread. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, and Travis felt his heart swell with love so strong it was almost painful. "Good morning," she said. "How are you feeling?" "Like I am the luckiest man who ever lived," he said, coming up behind her and kissing the back of her neck. She turned in his arms, her hands leaving flower prints on his shirt. "What brought that on?" "Just thinking about how far we have come. That day I found you on the road. I never imagined it would lead to all this. A lifetime of love, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren now. A ranch that will outlast us both, all because I stopped to offer help to a stranger." Zara's eyes were suspiciously bright. "All because you saw someone who needed help and decided to care. That is who you are, Travis. That is who you have always been." "I learned it from good people," he said. "My parents, Dutch, you. All of you taught me that love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make every day." "And I choose you," Zara said. "Every single day." They stood there in the kitchen, flour and all, just holding each other while the morning sun streamed through the windows. Outside, they could hear the sounds of the ranch waking up, horses nickering in the corrals, cattle lowing in the pastures, voices calling back and forth as the work of the day began. It was a symphony they had been listening to for nearly 50 years, and it never got old. Travis lived to see his 78th birthday, surrounded by his family on the porch of the house he had been born in. Zara sat beside him holding his hand, and he looked out at the sea of faces belonging to children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them carrying his blood and his legacy forward into the future. "This is everything," he said to Zara that night as they lay in bed. "Everything I could have hoped for." "I know," she whispered. "I know." He died peacefully 2 weeks later, just as the first wildflowers were blooming in the valley. Zara was holding his hand, her forehead pressed to his, whispering words of love as he slipped away. The family buried him on the hill next to Dutch, with a view of the entire valley spread out below. Zara lived for 5 more years after Travis's death. She stayed active and involved with the ranch, still the matriarch of the sprawling Fontaine family. But everyone could see that something had dimmed in her, that without Travis by her side, the world was a little less bright. On a summer evening, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Zara felt her heart simply stop. It was peaceful, painless, just a gentle slipping away. They found her the next morning still sitting in her chair, a slight smile on her face, as if she had seen something wonderful just before the end. The family buried her next to Travis on the hill, the two of them together even in death. Matthew stood at the grave with his arm around his sister, both of them crying openly as they said goodbye to the woman who had walked into their father's life, carrying everything she owned and had given him, and all of them, a legacy of love that would endure for generations. Years later, Matthew's grandson would ask about the story of how his great-great-grandparents met. Matthew, an old man himself now, would tell the tale of a cowboy who found a desperate woman at the town limits and offered help, of 4 simple words that changed 2 lives and created a family that now numbered in the dozens. "The most important thing your great-great-grandfather ever did," Matthew would say, "was stop and offer kindness to a stranger. Everything we have, everything we are, comes from that single choice. Remember that. Remember that love and kindness and choosing to help someone in need can change the world." And so the story passed into family legend, told and retold around dinner tables and on front porches, a reminder that the greatest legacies are not built on land or wealth, but on love and the simple human choice to care for one another. Travis and Zara's love story became the foundation of the Fontaine family, a testament to the power of compassion and the enduring strength of 2 people who chose each other and built a life that mattered. The ranch still stands, passed down through the generations, and if you visit on a summer evening when the light is just right, locals will tell you that you can sometimes see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old house, hand in hand, watching the sunset over the valley they loved. Whether it is true or just a romantic story does not really matter. What matters is that Travis and Zara Fontaine found each other against all odds, loved each other through hardship and joy, and left behind a legacy that continues to inspire their descendants to this day. Their story began with 4 words on a dusty Montana road. "Need some help?" It was a simple question that opened the door to a lifetime of love, partnership, and family. And in the end, that simple choice to offer help to a stranger became the most important decision either of them ever made.